We just saw a taste of the International Women's Day marches on March 8th across the country for Rise Up for Abortion Rights. This was a great beginning of a momentous battle for women's lives, which will be the main subject of today's show. And this show is the Revolution Nothing Less show. And today is March 10th, 2022. This is our 92nd episode. My name is Andy Zee, and I am coming to you from Revolution Books in Harlem, New York. In just a few minutes, I'm going to be joined by my co-host, Sunsara Taylor, who is not only the co-host of the show, but she's also one of the initiators and the leaders of RiseUpForAbortionRights.org. We're living through extraordinary times. The sharp, brutal contradictions of this volcano of a system have roiled and rumbled under the surface for decades, and from time to time they've flared up, erupting in ways now that are beginning to call into question the morrow for many, many people. A quick survey of just some of the sharpest developments of the last 2 weeks. Images of a brutal Russian imperialist aggression in Ukraine shock. While the U.S. and the Western imperialist bloc, which have been circling and provoking Russia for decades, unleashes countermeasures that threaten to take the world to the brink of a wider inter-imperialist war. Environmental catastrophe, reported by the United Nations 12 days ago to be even worse than the previous dire predictions, is now raised to even greater danger as the war in the Ukraine escalates, with the danger of even the most limited nuclear war. Besides all of the horrors and death and destruction that will entail, could set in motion existential environmental destruction of life on Earth. Within the United States, the sharp divide between the fascist Republican Party and the Democrats grows more extreme and intractable every day, spewing into school board meetings and virtually every sphere of civic life. It reaches right down into the most intimate aspects of people's lives, and the dangers surround and permeate people in their lives and in their thinking. You are watching the only show on the internet that presents the way out of this madness, the Revolution Nothing Less show. The revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian, has written a seminal work for this moment in history, something terrible or something truly emancipating. Profound crisis, deepening divisions, and the looming possibility of civil war, and the revolution that is urgently needed. I want to repeat the beginning title of this again. Something terrible or something truly emancipating. And this work is the necessary foundation and a basic roadmap for this revolution. And it is the basic roadmap and the basic foundation for what we bring to you every week on the Revolution Nothing Less show. Yes, the terrible, even catastrophic future that looms contains within it the basis, the seeds of its opposite. Thousands and then millions awakening to the root cause of the horrific situation that humanity faces in the capitalist imperialist system. Becoming organized into a movement for a real revolution to overthrow this system and bring into being a far different and far better world, aiming for the emancipation of all of humanity. This is a work you must read, and you can find it online at our website, revcom.us. In this country, the battle over two futures is posed most sharply right now, with women's right to abortion hanging in the balance. The Supreme Court of the United States, packed with fascists, raised the impact of a decision that will rip from half of humanity in this country control over their own bodies, their lives, as they will be forced by the state to bear children, effectively enslaved in this fundamental aspect of their very beings to the state. This is the trajectory that things have been on till now. A horrific reality that the fascist Republican Party and the Christian fascist movement at their core has been fighting for, murdering doctors for, and packing the Supreme Court for. But it is also what the Democratic Party and the official women's movement has surrendered to as the reality that will come to be. But that began to change this past week on March 8th, on International Women's Day. That brutal future need not be what is to come. Not if the women and all the beautiful people, as Sunsara Taylor, my co-host, said when she greeted the march in New York City. If all these people who came out this past week, the hundreds who came out, declare their conviction, their determination, their intention to build a movement of sustained, determined struggle in the streets, to say, no, you won't do this. We demand abortion on demand and without apology. And this will be the focus of today's show. And following that, we're going to do a segment on Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, featuring an excerpt from an event right here at Revolution Books with myself and Raymond Latta last Friday night on the war in Ukraine. So stick around. Okay, Sunsara, welcome to Revolution Books and to our show, the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. And as I said earlier, Sunsara is one of the initiators and leaders of the movement RiseUpForAbortionRights.org. Sunsara, yesterday was so much fun. I think it was, as I said at the beginning of the show, a very, very important beginning to this movement in a very urgent situation. So maybe you could encapsulate some of this for the RNL Revolution Nothing Less audience.
For everybody who's been watching this show, we've covered it extensively, but a lot of people in society still don't know. And so I just want to start by saying abortion rights in this country are in a state of emergency. And women's lives are in a state of emergency. The Supreme Court is set to rule on a case in a matter of a few short months that could completely gut abortion rights and abortion protections across this country and create a situation where many, many, many women are forced to have children against their will and enslaved in that way. And so there's a huge fight on our hands to bring people out in the streets, to wake people up, to rally, to resist in a determined and massive way, in an ongoing, relentless way, to stop this from going down. And we made a really important advance in this a couple days ago on International Women's Day, where people did come out in the streets. It was hundreds. It was not yet thousands or tens of thousands, but these were people who were angry. These were people who were determined. They were young people whose whole future is sitting before them, and they're horrified and furious about this enslavement of women that's coming. They were people with depth of experience, people who remember before abortion was legal, the stakes of what women had to go through, who were denied abortion access, and important voices from the arts, religious leaders, a really impressive beginning breadth with a lot of depth and determination. And it was rowdy, and it was in the streets, and it felt good, and it's something to build on.
Okay, so we had a great beginning, and a great beginning means there has to be even greater stuff to come. So what is the plan to get us moving to the point where we can have the kind of sustained, determined struggle that is going to be necessary to win this fight?
Yeah, so in a minute, we're going to show footage from the New York City rally and some of the footage from at least a snippet, a taste of what happened around the country and in the streets. But one of the things that we announced at all of these events, and we want to really drive home to everybody watching, is the weekend of March 19th and 20th. RiseUpForAbortionRights.org is organizing mass organizing meetings where everybody who came out in the streets, everybody who was inspired by what you saw in the streets, and everybody we can reach in the next week and a half, we bring them together in truly mass meetings. People who are new to this movement, people who have more experience, come together and get organized, talk with each other, work with each other, and figure out how we're going to get out and blanket all of society and really wake people up and come back 1 month after March 8th, International Women's Day. We're coming back into the streets on Saturday, April 9th, and we want to be thousands strong this time. And we're taking up, as you'll see in the video, we're taking up the green bandana, which is the symbol that was taken up in Argentina, in Colombia, in other parts of the world, now in El Salvador, where people are standing up and fighting against the criminalization of abortion, and they've actually had victories in several countries, and they're still fighting other places. And this is a symbol of people who went in the streets in massive numbers and changed what was possible through their struggles. So April 9th, we're coming back in the streets, and April 8th is, and all the way leading up actually, but April 8th is a day of wearing green. It's a Friday. And And we want people to wear it at their schools, in their workplaces, hospitals. People should wear it, do banner drops, all kinds of creative things with the green on that day, and then back in the streets. So there's a lot of work to do. And by doing that, coming back in the streets on April 9th, that's to wake even more people up, to gather even more momentum, and to get the rhythm of coming back in the streets in sustained and growing mass struggle. So that's the next steps.
All right, so let's show a video that we've put together of just some of the footage. We've been inundated with footage from the various demonstrations, but we want to show you some of the key speeches, including a good part of what you said as a leader of this movement, and give you a taste of what happened. And then we'll be working on with this footage more, and there'll be things up on the website, riseupfораbortionrights.org. But let's go to this right now.
Welcome! Happy International Women's Day! We're here today with our sisters and brothers in Los Angeles, in Atlanta, in Boston, Chicago, Cleveland, D.C., Detroit, Honolulu, San Francisco, and Seattle to say we refuse to let the U.S. Supreme Court deny women's humanity and decimate their rights. Abortion on demand and without apology.
Happy International Women's Day. But how many of you know that International Women's Day was born in struggle? In 1908, you had thousands of women marching down the garment district, garment workers, demanding for better working conditions, for higher pay, and the right to vote, So I do not see this as purely a day to celebrate. What I see this as a day for commitment and recommitment to what I consider the transcendent cause of the women's movement. Because the right to decide when and whether or not to be a mother is the front line and the bottom line of women's freedom and liberation.
Because the desire to control looms and birth giving is the very definition of patriarchy, power over women's bodies has always come first. The morning after Hitler was elected, for instance, his very first act was to padlock the family planning clinics and declare abortion to be a crime against the state. I also wanted to quickly say it's no coincidence I'm reading this statement from her, because my path as a feminist writer and now running a global women's news organization is because of Gloria and her writing and the magazine that she started, Ms. Magazine, and of course has saved so many lives through her words. But although for the last few decades I have been writing about feminism, it's only been very recently, probably no more than a month or two ago, that I said, if I'm really going to follow women like her, I need to be out there in the streets, not just writing behind a computer and putting it out there. There is nothing like being out in the streets, stepping up and standing up.
We're no longer going to wait for permission to challenge oppressive religious beliefs and misogyny and horrific notions of controlling the very fabric of women's destinies.
All right, so I want to give a quick shout out. Right here we got a contingent from Harlem for abortion on demand and without apology.
So I remember George Tiller as my older next door neighbor growing up in Wichita, Kansas. And I remember the rage I felt when I heard that he was assassinated on May the 31st, 2009. In 2016, inspired by George's life, I joined the board of directors of Trust Women. If he were alive today, I believe that in body and spirit, he would join us in the streets, these streets, to resist and defeat the current assault on women, to demonstrate in word and deed that every woman and every girl should have a future as full and equal human beings, and that indeed forced motherhood is female enslavement.
I'm 15 years old and I'm angry. We are done being polite. We are done feeling hopeless and fearing that our right to abortion could be taken away at any moment. So let's all keep up this fucking fight, because it's going to be a long one, but it's important. Abortion on demand and without apology.
If one woman hurts, if one woman cries, if one man bleeds, rise. Up, get up, dance up, get up, sing up, get up, change everything. Up, get up, dance up, get up, sing up, get up, change everything.
Fui violada, sufrí por años, fui burlada por la gente, por mis vecinos, por mi familia, pero los más malos fueron los que hicieron las leyes que prohíben el aborto. Y por eso hoy he parado de llorar. Este es un día que debemos empezar a salir a las calles a gritar fuerte. Tengo el derecho a decidir. Tengo el derecho al aborto. Porque es mi vida. Porque es mi cuerpo. Porque nosotras tenemos el derecho a decidir. It's my choice. Y no lo voy a perder. Mujeres, pasen la voz, salgan a la calle desde hoy hasta que sea el día de la Corte, que la Corte Suprema quiere decidir en nuestra vida. Salgamos a gritar, no voy a permitir que me quites ese derecho.
It is possible to stop this fascist assault on women. It is possible. But it is not possible by constricting ourselves to choosing between candidates where one half of them are fascist lunatics who sometimes refer to women as host bodies, and the other half are led by a president, Biden, who will not even say the word abortion. We cannot win by accepting defeat in advance. And we have to be honest, this is what way too much of the so-called leaders of the so-called women's movement have done already. They have accepted that Roe v. Wade will fall and abortion rights will be gone. No, this has to stop. Women are not incubators. They are not. Women are not property of the state. Women are full human beings. And we have to go out today and going forward, all of us here, and wake up and organize and mobilize the one force that is powerful enough to stop this fascist assault. And that is the masses of people rising up in their millions, relentlessly again and again, filling the streets with our fury, shutting down the campuses and walking out, shutting down the freeways, taking over everywhere again and again, and making clear to the fascists on the court and everywhere else that if they try to take this right away, if they try to slam women backwards, their society will be prevented from functioning at all. And if we want an example of what can be accomplished by people who refuse to accept the unacceptable and who dare to go out and challenge others, look at the women of Colombia. Look at the women of Argentina. Look at the women in Mexico. This is why we wear this green bandana. If you do not know, those are deeply Catholic countries, very repressive states, very patriarchal. Places where abortion has been criminalized for years, women sent to prison for miscarriages. But the women down there went in the streets, not once, but again and again, relentlessly. Sometimes 1 million strong, and they waved this green bandana, and they kept coming back, and they tore down those laws, and they decriminalized abortion. Through their struggle, they made what everybody thought was impossible, possible. And we, as we go out, we will find others who are like us. And as we do, we're going to open up the big questions about what kind of society do we live in that has put these fascist lunatics in power? Where does this desire to control women come from?
And what will it take to end it once and for all? And for my part, as a follower of the revolutionary leader Bolshevikian, who is also the architect of the new communism, I'm going to be fighting for what I understand to be true, which is that all this patriarchy, all this oppression, all these centuries of patriarchal chains are rooted in this system, along with all the other forms of oppression, of capitalism and imperialism. And it cannot be ended without bringing that system down, without overthrowing it once and for all in an actual revolution. But until we do that, all this oppression will regenerate. Just like the villain in one of those misogynist slasher movies that you think is dead at the end, and he comes back, and he comes back. We have to bring this system down. But I also want to say a great strength of this movement is our diversity of views. We don't all agree. We come from different perspectives, but we stand shoulder to shoulder and insisting that women control their own bodies and lives. After today, we're going to organize to bring more people out. April 8th, we're going to spread this green bandana into the workplaces, hospitals, schools, everywhere. It'll be a day of green. And April 9th, we are coming back to this park thousands strong. And across this country, thousands strong. And from there, we are doubling down and doing it again and again until we flood the streets and bring this society to a halt. Because they must not be allowed to shatter the lives of women and slam history backwards.
I want to give a big shout out to our hermanas, our compañeras from Dominican Women Development Center who showed up.
I'm here standing for Gladys, who was pregnant with 4 other children, working in a blue-collar family, black family, with not enough money to feed those 4 mouths, and who brought with her church shame and spouse shame, but still needed to have an abortion, but had to go to that back alley place to have one. I'm here standing for Gladys. How about you? Are you standing for Gladys? If you can make a baby, you get to choose not to have a baby. If you can make a baby, you get to choose not to have a baby.
I am sick of fascism and hate. I am sick of indiscriminate bombs falling. I am sick of guns. I am sick from the destruction of our precious earth, from pillaging and raping and spilling and ravaging and extracting of our forests and seas and land. I am sick of patriarchy. No one, no man, no church, no state has the right to tell me, to tell you what we can and cannot do with our body. They cannot legislate what goes on in it. They cannot enter it without consent or meddle with it or determine what it needs. This is my womb. This is my vagina. This is my choice. Everyone does not want or need to be a mother. That dictum was created by patriarchs to keep women in their place, to mechanize childbirth, to use it as a form of oppression and suppression rather than a choice of love. The way we win is in the power of our love, in our unity, in our solidarity, in our sisterhood, our brotherhood, our bravery, our determination, and in our numbers. So say it with me. Abortion on demand. Without apology. Abortion on demand. Without apology. May it be so. Without apology. Abortion on demand. 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 Without apology. I can't hear you. Abortion on demand. Without apology. Mean it. Abortion on demand. Without apology. Abortion on demand, without apology. Abortion on demand, without apology. Abortion on demand 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 without apology. Thank you, everybody. We're going to march now.
So that was a first pass at a video of the demonstration. It featured a lot of the speeches from New York, not all of them. And we have a ton of material at the RNL studio in Los Angeles. And I want to thank all the photographers and videographers who sent stuff to us. We're going to be compiling things from the different cities and be showing much more next week.
And on our website too, revcom.us. We'll show even more there.
Right, it'll be on our website, and some of it will show up on the website of riseupforabortionrights.org. But I did want to highlight some of the things that we saw. You know, one, the role of, in New York when the high school students marched in from different places. Mm-hmm. One of them, one group from one high school organized their moms to come, which is really kind of cool. And then there's that picture from Cal and Berkeley where hundreds of students marched through the campus. We need to see that happening all over the country. It's tremendously significant. My understanding is they then marched from there to Berkeley High, and there was a speak out in front. I've seen a few social media posts and some footage of that. And here in New York, we had different Latino groups there, from the Dominican women, from, as I said, I think earlier, from Argentina. And it was very, very impressive. At the very end of the march, we had a breakout group of organizers from in Spanish language. And then there was the LGBTQ community who was out there in its significant numbers. And there were a lot of men in the audience. And so this was, as well as people who had lived and told stories of before Roe v. Wade. And we're in Revolution Books. Some of our older supporters from Revolution Books came downtown, and they were there in their chairs with a banner from Harlem, New York. So look, it was very significant, and it obviously is essential to have all of this for the movement to stop this attack on abortion rights, and especially the young people are going to be necessary, the students, if we're going to fill the streets in a sustained way. But this also has tremendous significance for revolution. On one hand, this battle won't be won without it. And actually, if the battle is lost, a deeper nail in the coffin of a defeated people is going to permeate society. On the other hand, if people take this up and fight in the way that's necessary, it's going to create a lot of possibility and a lot of questioning. And the liberation of women is a key reason why we need a revolution, and it's a key part of and measure of the revolution.
I think it is true. And the Christian fascists and the theocrats and all of the fascists who have really, for years, built up a movement against abortion have been very clear that it is a spear point and a battering ram. It's an assault on women, very much, an attempt to control women. It's also a battering ram for an entire fascist program that includes, it's just laced with the white supremacy, the hatred of immigrants, the denial of science, the destruction of the planet, and the USA #1, the US imperialist chauvinism around the world. So on the one hand, if this assault on women is bowed down to and allowed to go and steamroller ahead, it's not only going to decimate the lives of many, many women, it's going to advance and accelerate this whole fascist program. And exactly like you said, in the converse, if people rise up against this, if people stand up and challenge this and defeat this, it's going to give people a sense of their strength. It's going to lift people's sights. It's going to strengthen the fighting capacity and spirit of the people. And yes, it's going to open up and create more space for the revolutionaries, the revcoms, and those of us who understand the source of this oppression, to get out there and fight for people to open their eyes to the fact that this is rooted in the system of capitalism, imperialism. You cannot break the chains on women without bringing this system down. Mm-hmm. And you can't make a revolution without unleashing the fury of women. This is one of the mightiest forces to make a revolution, to bring the system down and overthrow it. And so these things are very bound together. And this is why, look, we're in this fight, and we helped initiate this. I helped initiate this movement because we're serious about defeating this assault on women. But we do come at it, those of us who are revcoms, from the perspective of getting organized for an actual revolution. And we were very happy to be out there amongst people. And we want to share from Noche Diaz, who is the spokesperson nationally for the Revolution Clubs, who spoke at the rally in Los Angeles, just a clip of what he delivered and a call to everybody watching to not only get with the Revolution Club, but do like he's doing, spread and recruit others into it.
Now look, there are people here who are reverends. There are people here who are socialists, communists, atheists, gay, straight, lesbian, transgendered, non-conforming, all kinds of things. And we should all be together today and going forward. But I am a communist. I'm a follower of Bob Avakian. I'm the spokesperson for the Revolution Clubs, and we're organizing people to fight this fight because of what it means and because we need a better world. Our points of attention say, number 2 says, we fight for a world where all the chains are broken. Women, men, and differently gendered people are equals and comrades. This is the world we need to be fighting for. It needs to be long past time that we have to fight against every damn attack on people's rights over and over again. But it is in these times when the possibility to fight for something beautiful could emerge, when things seem the darkest, the most dangerous, the most ugly, the most hopeless. Looking straight into the teeth of that situation, the potential to wrench something totally different and beautiful out of it rests. And that is what we are doing today and going forward. And if you want to be part of understanding what's given rise to this and how we are working to put an end to this system, go see people with the Revolution Nothing Less shirts. Find out about the Revolution Clubs and how we're organizing to do this. And let us win this fight to demand abortion on demand and without apology. To stop this Supreme Court from being able to rip women's right to control their own destinies and their own futures.
That was Noche Diaz, the spokesperson for the Revolution Clubs, speaking in Los Angeles. And so, Sunsara, we're coming to the end of this segment for this week.
Yeah, so I would just urge everybody, we'll be covering, like Andy said, more footage from these rallies and of the upcoming organizing meetings, March 19th and 20th, across the country, mass organizing meetings you need to be at and bring people to. And then the April 8th, Day of Green, and the April 9th, Mass Back in the Streets. We'll be covering this next week. Also, go to our website, revcom.us. We'll be putting up a lot more footage and photos and speeches. And definitely go to riseup4abortionrights.org and connect with the broader movement. And we'll have more in the future.
All right, so just a second, I'm going to be doing a segment on Ukraine. Now to the Ukraine.
I believe in America. America has made my fortune.
I believe in America. So opens the epic film The Godfather by Francis Ford Coppola. These words are spoken by an undertaker who comes into view out of the darkness and who has come to the Don, the mafia boss, Don Corleone, with his story of the vicious rape of his daughter, with a patriarchal plea for violent vengeance for what has been done to his and his daughter's honor. And what follows in the film is indeed vicious and brutal, but I won't say more for those who haven't seen it. I would say that it's an uncanny coincidence of the 50th anniversary of the Godfather epic and its re-release with this moment when Americans are being primed with vengeance and revenge to sacrifice for the interests of this system that has given rise to war and all the other atrocities that this system rains down on people here and around the world. I would say this is a remarkable coincidence, except for the fact that America is a place that has celebrated, practiced, and woven into its culture the most vicious, violent vengeance. So yes, it is fitting in this moment when the biggest oppressor on the planet, U.S. imperialism, is posturing as the great peacekeeper and moral compass in the world, to introduce this segment on the war in Ukraine with the opening of I Believe in America from The Godfather. So with this, I want to introduce a clip of some of a talk I gave last week here at Revolution Books in Harlem in a program with Raymond Latta that was titled War in Ukraine. What is happening? Why is it happening? Where do the interests of humanity lie? And what does that have to do with the revolution that humanity so urgently needs? Here's a few points just to get started. This, the illegitimate, the illegal, the brutal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and how the US and the Western powers respond, is a major shaping event whose impact should not be underestimated. All wars are full of uncertainty, calculation and miscalculation. And with the Russia and the US possessing 8,000 nuclear weapons, with the possibility of destroying the Earth and much of life on it, the danger is truly profound. This must not be underestimated. There is, at the same time, the danger of how people here in the United States, as well as around the world, are being fed a dangerous ideological poison of American chauvinism, a way of thinking that leads people to see their interests bound up with the system that exploits, oppresses, and terrorizes the people of the world. A system which has created a myth of America as the land of the free, the land of opportunity, with freedom and justice for all, when the brutal, the bitter reality is that this country is founded on the genocide of the native peoples and the theft of their land, and the theft of 1/3 of Mexico through a bloody war. This is a country whose startup wealth was from the enslavement of African people and the continued super exploitation and oppression of black people and people of color ever since, right down to today. This is a country that claims to welcome the tired, the poor, the huddled masses, and then has built up its wealth through the demonization, deportation, and incarceration of immigrants. This is a country with the largest prison population in the world, a country where women throughout its history have been treated as second-class citizens and who today are subject to rape, sexual violence, degradation, and now are on the brink of losing the fundamental right to abortion, without which their bodies, their lives, their futures will be enslaved to the state. A country where LGBTQ, there you go, people have just won some of the most basic rights, which now hang in the balance and stand to be taken away. A country which is by far the largest polluter of the earth. The U.S. has waged wars, invaded, staged coups all around the world for most of its existence. All the God bless Americas that are uttered by those who rule over the people of this country should give pause to think about what kind of God would create such a monstrous system, and then scientifically see the light that this is not some imaginary God that created this horror, but the system we live under, capitalism, imperialism, a system whose time needs to be and can be up. So here in the talk, I went to a film clip of Bob Avakian in a talk he gave in 2017, a film clip that's on our website called The GTF. The GTF is the great tautological fallacy, the circular argument that whatever America does is good because America is the good guys. But because of limited time left on today's show, I'm not going to show this clip right now, but watch it right here on our YouTube channel. However, then my talk continued with an excerpt from a crucial article for this moment from Bob Avakian that sharply polemics the ideological poison that drenches the atmosphere, from the fascist Republicans to the mainstream liberals to the progressive movements. And I quote from Bob Avakian's article, "Shameless American Chauvinism, Anti-Authoritarianism as a Cover for Supporting U.S. Imperialism."
For those of us who are not willing to be blinded by this GTF, we can and must confront and analyze reality as it actually is and draw the necessary conclusions. Besides the fact that the U.S. is today and has historically been allied with many authoritarian governments throughout the world, and in fact has forcibly installed such governments in many countries, The even more fundamental fact is that the essence of the conflict between the US and countries like Russia and China is not one between democracy and authoritarianism, but is a matter of rivalry among imperialist powers, all of which are monstrous oppressors of masses of people, and none of which represent or act in the interest of humanity. What is called for, and urgently now, is to oppose all imperialist marauders and mass murderers, and all systems and relations of oppression and exploitation, while giving particular emphasis to opposing our own imperialist oppressors who commit their monstrous crimes in our name and seek to rally us to support them on the basis of a grotesque American chauvinism, which we must firmly reject and fiercely struggle against.
Right now, all too many people in this country are scurrying their behinds up behind the U.S. ruling class and its monstrous military machine. Let me give an example from someone who I used to really like a lot. Little Stevie Van Zandt, who plays Silvio Dante in The Sopranos and has been a part of Bruce Springsteen's band since its inception. Little Stevie has succumbed in a grotesque manner to the GTF. And I know many of you younger people don't know that Little Steven was a very progressive musician. He put out some great records and was a major force in creating a cultural movement against apartheid in South Africa. But here's what he's been running on Twitter. And this has become a big deal because it's being discussed on the major news channels. This is just a small selection of these tweets, and I think it represents what all too many people think and must not be thinking. He tweeted, "What happens if we destroy the Russian convoy and the forces encircling the cities with airstrikes or drones? Up front, what exactly does Russia do about it? Let's hear it. I'm just asking. How can we watch this madness and do nothing? We are better than him and stronger. Let's act like it. The world needs a police force. Until the UN is properly militarized, it has to be us." We who, Little Steven? Your boss, that is Springsteen, once wrote a song called Blinded by the Light. You now, unfortunately, are blinded and deluded about what kind of future the U.S. brings. In fact, as my colleague Raymond Latta will go into soon, the United States, with its IMF and World Bank and all of its arms and armies around the world, we enforce its own form of imperialist domination. And one more thing to Little Steven and anybody else who's at home thinking like, well, why don't they do this? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? But to Little Steven, bravado on a TV show with Tony Soprano is one thing. But playing with two countries who hold 95% of the nuclear weapons in the world, with the U.S. being the only country that has ever used it, not once but twice, is beyond crazy. It is playing with fire that could consume everything. That was the end of my opening talk at Revolution Books last week in the program on the Ukraine. And next week on the RNL show, we are planning to show an excerpt from Raymond Latta's very informative talk that was part of the program, in which he sharply made the case that, as he said, Ukraine is not a battleground for democracy, but a conflict zone of imperialist rivalry between Russian imperialism and U.S. and Western imperialism. So that brings us to the end of the 92nd episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. Spread this episode everywhere you can. Tell your friends. We need to get thousands of people watching this show, and we need your support. Become a Patreon and subscribe to our channel. I will see you next week at 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. Eastern time. And once again, spread the show, and we'll see you next week.